Nobody came. Not one car in the driveway, not one knock at the door, not one smile for my little girl. The balloons sagged against the ceiling, the cake sat untouched, and my daughter, my sweet, innocent 11-year-old, kept asking me, "Mom, are they late?" That was the moment betrayal sank its claws into me. My name is Rachel Carter. And from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Because I need to ask you, have you ever been treated like a stranger in your own family? I stood in that living room staring at 30 paper plates I had set out, each one a hope that someone, anyone would show up. But no one came. Not my mother, not my sisters, not even my cousins. My daughter blew out candles alone, whispering a wish she wouldn't tell me. A week later my phone buzzed. A message from my mom. For a moment I thought maybe she'd apologize, maybe she'd say something like, "Sorry we forgot." But no. It was an invitation. My niece's sweet 16, $2,100 per person. Venmo me. No sorry. No explanation. No acknowledgement of what they'd done. Just a demand for money like I was nothing more than a wallet. Something inside me snapped. I opened Venmo. Typed in her name. Amount, $1. Note, congratulations. And I hit send. That was the night I changed the locks. That was the night I blocked her number. And 2 days later, there was a pounding on my door. When I opened it, I saw something I never thought I'd see. The police. And in that moment I realized, this wasn't just about an empty birthday party anymore. This was war. The officer's knuckles rapped against the frame again, louder this time. My daughter peeked from the hallway, her eyes wide. I forced a steady breath, tucked her behind me, and pulled the door open. 2 uniformed men stood there, their presence heavy, official. One adjusted his cap. "Rachel Carter?" "Yes," I said, my voice steady even though my hands trembled. "We received a complaint," the taller one explained. "Something about theft, property damage, and harassment." My stomach turned cold. Theft? Property damage? I hadn't seen my family in weeks. "Who filed it?" I asked. He glanced at his clipboard. "Your mother. Linda Carter." For a second I laughed, a short, bitter sound that didn't feel like my own. "My mother called the police on me? She alleges you stole money from a family fund. That you've been threatening her. That you changed the locks on her house." I blinked. Her house. The words hit like a slap. My house. I had paid every mortgage payment, every repair, every tax bill. But in her story, I was suddenly a criminal squatting in property that wasn't mine. I swallowed rage and answered carefully. "This is my house. I've owned it for 7 years. I didn't steal anything. I don't owe her a dime." The officers exchanged a look as if trying to decide if I was lying. The taller one finally said, "We'll file this as a dispute for now, but you might want to resolve things with your family before it escalates." Resolve things? With people who couldn't even show up for my daughter's birthday cake? With people who valued money over love? When the door closed behind them, my knees buckled. My daughter wrapped her small arms around my waist, whispering, "Mom, are you in trouble?" I knelt down, looked her in the eyes. "No, sweetheart. But they just made the biggest mistake of their lives." That night I dug through every drawer, every file cabinet. I pulled out deeds, bank statements, utility bills. Proof of ownership, proof of independence, proof that I wasn't the villain my mother was trying to paint me as. I laid them across the dining table like evidence in a courtroom. And in the silence of that midnight hour I realized something. This wasn't just betrayal. This was an erasure. My own mother was trying to erase me, my worth, my work, my home, so she could build her kingdom around someone else. And the someone else was my niece. The golden child. The one they were all saving up $2,000 tickets for. I felt fire crawl up my spine. They thought I'd bow. They thought I'd back down. But they had no idea who I had become. Because once you watch your daughter blow out birthday candles alone, you stop asking for a place at the table. You build your own. And when my mother tried to tear mine down, I promised myself I would burn hers to the ground. I watched the porch light blink until it went out, and then I switched on every lamp in the house until the rooms looked too loud for the silence. The police report sat heavy in my inbox like a verdict not yet delivered. I could feel my mother's words crawling through the phone lines, trying to reposition reality so that she owned the truth. I don't beg. I don't beg for apologies, and I don't beg for recognition. When I'm pushed into a corner, I study the angles. I learn the edges. I map out the places where their armor is weakest. First move: evidence. I scanned every page of mortgage records until the numbers aligned like constellations proving I existed. I took photos of utility bills with timestamps. I saved emails. Every small thing that stitched the story of my life into proof. When their version was paper-thin, my evidence would be steel. Second move: witnesses. Neighbors remembered the nights I shoveled the walk, the time I took in their stray dog, the Thanksgiving when I cooked an extra pie for old Mr. Alvarez down the street. People had seen me show up when family had not. I knocked on doors not to gossip, but to gather the simple, stubborn truth. I lived here. I paid. I raised my daughter. Ordinary things, but ordinary carried weight when the lie was large. Third move: narrative. If they tried to paint me as angry and unstable, I would make my voice louder, cleaner. I started keeping a log. Calls blocked, messages ignored, invitations refused. I wrote everything down not because I wanted to relive it, but because lists are killers of ambiguity. You can argue with feelings, but you can't argue with a dated, signed ledger. There was a fourth move I hadn't planned until I saw how comfortable they'd become with their power. They had started a line people queued for: favors, flattery, and money. So I planted a seed where they least expected it. Among their supporters, the ones counting the guest list for that $2,100 spectacle. I didn't lie. I didn't need to. I told the truth, blunt and sharp. My daughter's birthday, alone in our living room, the cake with a single candle that we still ate because we are the kind of people who make do. It spread like a scent. A few text threads shifted. A couple of RSVP emails stalled. People don't like being reminded that their choices look ugly in the light. Ugly is contagious. That night, after I'd filed another stack of documents, my daughter crawled into my lap with sticky frosting on her chin and a solemn little face. "Did they mean it, Mommy?" she asked, like the word family was fragile glass. I stroked her hair and told her this: they meant only what benefits them. But we mean everything. Her hand found mine in the dark, and for the first time since the police had stood on my porch, I felt the scale tip a little. Not because I'd won anything yet, but because the tilt had begun. I was no longer reacting. I was composing. And the melody I hummed under my breath had sharp edges. In the morning I called a number I hadn't used in years. An old account where receipts accumulate and history lives. And I left it open like bait. They would come for the money they thought they owned. They would find instead a mirror. And mirrors are unforgiving. The call came faster than I expected. A blocked number. A voice that tried to sound polished but cracked around the edges. My mother. "Rachel," she said, cold, like my name was a debt she resented paying. "I hear you've been spreading things." I let the silence hang until it bent. "What things?" I asked softly. "That pathetic little story about your daughter's birthday." Her tone sharpened, brittle glass ready to shatter. "Do you know what damage you've caused? People are calling me. People are canceling. Do you think I won't find out?" The satisfaction was a low, steady flame in my chest. "All I did was tell the truth," I said. She laughed, sharp and humorless. "Truth? Rachel, the truth is what people believe. And they believe me. Always have." She wanted me to flinch. Instead, I leaned back in my chair, foam pressed loose to my ear. "Not anymore." Her breath caught, just enough for me to hear it. A crack in her armor. Then came the venom. "You've always been jealous. Of me. Of your sister. Of your niece. That's why you try to ruin what you can't be part of. Do you know how sad that looks? You'll die bitter and alone." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "You already killed the part of me that wanted your approval. Now all that's left is the part you should be afraid of." The silence that followed was thick, pulsing. Then quick. She hung up. But she wasn't done. I knew my mother. When she couldn't control you with shame, she reached for destruction. That night, as my daughter slept in the next room, I stood at the window and watched headlights linger across the street. The same car idling too long, engine humming low. Watching. Waiting. I closed the curtains and checked the locks. My locks, the ones she claimed belonged to her. Every click of the deadbolt was a vow. You will not take this from me. The next morning I found the first message slipped under my door. A printed sheet, no signature. Give it back before you regret it. I stared at the words until they blurred. Give what back? My life. My home. My voice. I crumpled the page and tossed it in the trash. But deep down I knew this was only the beginning. If she wanted war, she'd get it. Not in the shadows, not whispered in gossip threads, but out in the open where every ugly truth she'd buried would claw its way into daylight. Because family secrets rot when exposed to air. And I was about to open every window. They wanted whispers. I gave them a microphone. First, I put the facts where they couldn't be smothered. Public posts with scanned deeds, dated photos, and a timeline of messages where my mother demanded $1 for family repairs, and then ignored my daughter's birthday. I wrote like a journalist. Short sentences, receipts attached, no flourish. Because truth dressed plainly is harder to accuse of melodrama. The first comment came from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. I didn't know. The second was a screenshot from an RSVP'd guest. I thought it was normal to get charged. Then the momentum shifted. People began to tag mutual friends, then neighbors, then old school acquaintances who remembered me as the one who tutored math in exchange for a casserole. A local community group I'd once donated to posted, "We stand with parents who show up." The thread filled like rain into a canyon. My mother called and left 3 voicemails in 20 minutes. Frantic, rehearsed. Her words were the same as always. Pompous, entitled, coded in the righteousness of the successful. She accused me of defamation. She demanded I remove everything. She threatened legal action. So I did the only thing that made sense when someone tries to censor your life. I pressed record. I found a quiet corner, tapped the red light, and spoke. I told the story again, but this time to the internet. No theatrics, just the night of the birthday, the cake, the empty driveway, the Venmo request for $2,100, the $1 I sent with a note that read, "Congratulations." I named names. I read voicemails. I let the pauses sit like stones. 100,000 views later, the next knock on my door wasn't police. It was a reporter from the local paper asking for an interview. They wanted transcripts, proof, witnesses. I gave them everything. I gave them Mr. Alvarez's number, the neighbor who'd seen my daughter in her party dress at the window, the printed invitations no one used. I handed them the file of bills that spelled out my life in ink. Suddenly, Linda Carter's carefully curated world. Portraits on the mantel, invitations stapled to glittered envelopes, looked like stage props. Sponsors who'd been flirting with the niece's party pulled out. 2 families called to say they wouldn't attend a celebration that asked for $2,100 per person. A fundraiser page that had been collecting gifts for the Sweet 16 froze under scrutiny. There was a good kind of violence in honesty. It didn't feel like revenge so much as reckoning. That night, my mother texted one line, "You'll pay." She meant money, but she meant more. Reputation, lineage, the illusion she'd sold for years. I didn't reply. I made tea and walked into my daughter's room. She was sketching a cake with tiny figures around it. Her family drawn as stick people with question marks over their heads. "Do you want them to come?" I asked. She shrugged, looked at me and said, "I want people who like me because I'm me." I felt something loosen inside me, like a knot finally finding the end. I had expected to feel satisfaction when the world saw them, but what flooded me instead was relief. The quiet kind that follows truth told aloud. Across town, a girl in a sequin dress practiced her smile for a party that was unraveling. I pictured my mother pacing, counting, and fumbling for control. They'd thought money made them untouchable. They'd forgotten how fragile that currency is when everyone can see the ledger. The next morning, a courier left a plain envelope at my doorstep. No return address. Inside, a single photo, my daughter blowing out her solitary candle captured from the street. Below it, in handwriting I recognized, "You started this." I stared at the photo until her small face blurred, and then I did something I hadn't allowed myself. I laughed. It was not the bitter sound my mother expected. It was clean, quick, and sure. Because starting something didn't mean losing. Sometimes starting was all the power you needed. The picture shook me more than I wanted to admit. Someone had stood outside that night watching my daughter lean over her cake, documenting her loneliness like it was a trophy. That was no accident. That was a warning. I pinned the photo to the board above my desk. Not to scare myself, but to remind me what I was fighting for. By then the story had spiraled beyond me. A podcast episode dissected it. Strangers on TikTok reenacted the $1 Venmo with dramatic flair. And memes about $2 100 Sweet 16 surfaced like weeds. My mother had wanted a spectacle. She got one, but not the kind she could control. Still, she wasn't surrendering. I learned through a friend that she'd hired a lawyer, the kind who speaks in threats more than facts. Words like defamation and custody challenge started floating around. Custody. As if she could take my daughter, rewrite me right out of the picture. That was when fear gave way to fury. I scheduled a meeting with my own attorney. I laid every document on the polished wood desk. Deeds, bills, texts, the threatening note. He skimmed through them, eyebrows arching higher with each page. Finally, he leaned back, exhaled through his nose and said, "They don't have a case. But if they push, we can counter." The word glowed. For weeks I'd been defending, blocking, explaining. Now I could strike. And I knew exactly where. Because if there's one thing my mother valued above her image, it was her money. She paraded it, leveraged it, used it as proof of superiority. But I knew her secrets. The loans she'd taken out in her children's names, the family fund that was nothing more than her personal slush account, the checks that bounced quietly but never publicly. I started compiling. Not to spread rumors, not to speculate, but to drag the receipts into daylight. Quietly at first, emails to the right people, documents slipped to reporters who'd already been sniffing around. Then louder. A digital trail, screenshots, bank slips. One evening while my daughter slept, I typed a single post. "You wanted to play with fire, Mom. Here are the flames." Attached was the first of many files. Clean, undeniable, time-stamped proof of financial fraud that made a $2,100 ticket look like pocket change. The internet did the rest. By morning, her fundraiser page was shut down. A local station aired a segment, "Community Questions Carter Family Finances." A neighbor filmed my mother storming into her lawyer's office shouting, "Find out what she knows." That clip went viral before lunch. But the sweetest moment came from the simplest place. My daughter came home from school and said, "Mom, everyone was talking about us. But this time, they were on my side." She didn't fully understand, not yet. But I saw pride where shame had once sat. And that was the moment I realized. This was no longer just my fight. It was hers too. Still, victories are dangerous things. They taste so good you forget the next strike is already on its way. That night, another knock at my door echoed through the halls. Not police. Not reporters. When I opened it, I froze. My sister stood there, smiling. She leaned against my doorway like she belonged there, arms folded, lips curled into a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "My sister Danielle." "Long time, Ratch," she said, her tone sugary, dangerous. I didn't answer. Just held the doorframe like it was armor. She tilted her head, scanning my living room, the scattered papers, the evidence taped to the wall. "You've made quite the mess," she murmured. "Mom's losing her mind. Sponsors are pulling out. People are asking questions we don't want asked." I bit back a laugh. "Don't pretend this affects you the same way. You've always had her crown." She smirked. "Crowns are heavy, sis. You wouldn't understand." Her words dripped contempt, but her eyes flicked to the folder on my desk, the one stuffed with receipts I hadn't released yet. That's when I understood. She wasn't here to mend bridges. She was here to gather intel. "What do you want, Danielle?" I asked. She stepped closer, her perfume slicing through the air, a familiar scent that made me sick. "Simple. Delete the post. Hand over everything. Play nice and Mom might be willing to forgive you. You don't want this fight. Trust me. Forgive me." The absurdity landed like a stone in my chest. My daughter blowing out candles alone. Police on my doorstep. A photo of her taken through the window. And my mother orchestrating every blow. "Forgive me. I laughed then. Low, steady, dangerous. Tell Mom this, I don't need her forgiveness. I want her accountability. Her smile cracked. You don't know what you're doing, Rachel. This family, this name, it's bigger than you. I stepped forward, forcing her back into the night air. No, Danielle. For the first time it's not. It's mine. My story. My daughter's life. And I will bury anyone who tries to take that from me. For a moment her mask slipped. I saw fear. Then it hardened again and she spat the words. Fine. You want war? Don't cry when you bleed. I slammed the door in her face. The echo rattled through the house, through me, through every bone that had been aching for years. My daughter padded into the room, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Mom, who was that? I crouched down, kissed her forehead. Just someone who doesn't understand we're stronger than them. She nodded, trusting me with a simplicity that burned. When she went back to bed, I returned to my desk. Danielle's visit wasn't a warning. It was confirmation. I had them cornered. So I opened the last folder, the one with the deepest cuts, the ugliest truths. Loans in Danielle's name she never signed for. Insurance fraud with signatures traced. A fund supposedly for charity that never reached its destination. I uploaded them to the drive, locked and ready. Tomorrow I'd release it all. And by the time the world saw what my family really was, there would be nothing left for them to hide behind. Not money, not crowns, not blood. Because blood doesn't make family. Loyalty does. And theirs had run dry a long time ago. They told me I'd ruined everything. So I finished the job. I hit send before dawn when the world is honest and the internet is hungry. The drive link I'd built for months unfolded like a map. Bank statements, notarized affidavits, voicemail transcriptions, canceled checks, tax filings. Each file a match struck against the paper house they'd built. I added context. Dates, names, plain sentences. No flourish. No theatrics. Just proof and a note that read, if you want to know what $2,100 really buys, open this. Within hours the fundraiser froze. The reporter who'd once stood on my porch called back, voice low with satisfaction, they're subpoenaing her accounts. Clips of my mother's face flashed on local news. The soft veneer stripped, the practiced composure cracking. Her lawyer stopped returning calls. Danielle's smile got smaller in every photograph. The niece's party planner canceled 3 contracts and refunded deposits. The world they'd polished for decades began to peel. Then the quietest, cruelest thing happened. The ledger was audited. Old loans reappeared like skeletons. A charity account that had been a rumor became a headline. My mother's friends, those who'd posed with her at galas, texted to say they were out. That single syllable sounded like a verdict. There was a knock at my door 2 days later. Not the police this time, but an investigator with a polite face and eyes that had seen 1,000 excuses. He asked questions I'd already answered for the record. He asked them with patience, with a kindness I'd been denied. He took my files, my signed affidavits, the neighbor who'd watched my daughter that rainy night. He left with a promise that sounded finally like a result. The public crucifixion of my family didn't make me joyous. It made me steady. Revenge is not fireworks. It's a ledger balanced. It's hearing the truth and letting it do what truth does. Rearrange people's lives until what's left is honest. My mother called. Her voice was small like a child's, an animal caught between instinct and regret. Rachel, she said. No heading, no pretense. Just my name, soft as a prayer and as heavy as a stone. I told her one thing. I wanted you to see what you chose. She didn't argue. She couldn't. After the hearings and the headlines, when the noise finally faded, something unexpected happened. People began to come back, not the ones who'd demanded checks or favors, but the ones who had always been there in small, constant ways. Mrs. Alvarez with a casserole, the PTA president who'd never missed a bake sale, an aunt who sent a handwritten card that didn't ask for anything. They brought food. They brought patchwork apologies and invitations that didn't come with price tags. They brought the slow work of building a life that wasn't measured in social currency. On my daughter's 12th birthday, we invited 20 people. No RSVPs required. No fees. We hung paper lanterns, lit candles on a store-bought sheet cake, and let the afternoon move like water. Soft, inevitable. People sang. Someone brought a ukulele. My daughter blew out her candles with everyone around her this time. Her wish was a small thing I kept to myself. I watched her laugh, watched her shoulders loosen, watched her understand that the world could be kinder than it had been. I walked through the house afterward, past the framed receipts and the sticky notes, and I felt for the first time in months a quiet return. I hadn't only defended a home. I had reclaimed a story. They called it scandal in the papers. I called it truth. They tried to make me small, I kept getting up. And in the end, the most human thing happened. We were not perfect, but we were ours.